Karen, first and foremost, welcome to Dubai. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's amazing to be here.
You're most welcome. So let's go back a little bit, and we're not going to dwell too long on going back, but you know, one of these stories as founders, we've had many founders at the Retail Summit over the 4 years, and you have a very unique story. The business started with £100 loan, and you created a retail empire. Let's go back and talk about those early days and some of the perhaps challenges that you faced. I know there was a particular gentleman that advised you not to bother.
Advised what, sorry?
Not to bother. It won't never work.
Oh, was this the one in Tunbridge Wells?
Yes,
no?
That's the one.
The shop?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You've done your research.
I did do my research.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, building this business really came out of the lack of clothes available at that time, because I think you have to remember that the high street was so different back in the 80s to what it is today. And, you know, there was, and me being sort of quite petite, I really struggled as a child or growing up to find fashionable clothes. And fashion was, for me, something that I was passionate about. So I guess my mum had a sewing machine. She would make our clothes for my sister and myself. So I was in that environment where that was the norm. And I naturally felt at home with that. I did needlework at school. I loved it. Excelled in all of those areas. And so as soon as I was able to make clothes, I did. And I was making them for my dolls prior to making them for myself. And so it was inevitable, really, that I'd go into the industry, although I didn't realize it at the time. I was it was my teachers, really, that sort of saw this within me and thought, you know, what are you doing? This is what you should be doing. And they took me to a local college where they studied fashion and presented this end-of-year show and said, you know, what about this? And I said, what, me, kind of thing. Can I do that? And they said, yes, absolutely. Put a portfolio together and we'll you know, apply. And I got in, did 3 years. And when I came out, I wasn't really still sure what I wanted to do. But I started off by making shirts for friends. And then that led to a party plan idea, which was something that my mum suggested I do with the ladies from her work. And that sort of grew, and I guess that's where the £100 came in, really, because initially I just bought some fabric that I saw outside a store, which was like Sea Island cotton shirting. And when she suggested that I do the clothes parties, I said, well, I can't just sell shirts. So I managed to get this loan for £100 and bought 100 meters of white cotton, which I was able to make a small collection. Pretty boring, perhaps, but it was my start. And you know, slowly over, you know, the next few months, the parties grew, and so did the collection, because I was able to buy end-of-line fabrics from markets or from places in Commercial Road, Brick Lane. So, yeah, that's kind of the early days.
Well, early days, moving into 400 stores in 65 countries.
I'm not sure the exact amount. I mean, obviously, sort of up to the point that we sold the business, which was in 2004, we had about 130 stores worldwide. And then I think it went on to about 360 worldwide until its demise.
Sure, we'll get to that later. So moving on, you mentioned the sale of the brand, and obviously that was a significant shift in your life, going from, you know, hands-on, making the product, you know, designing, creating, to, you know, obviously selling the brand. And we've seen similar stories when we've, you know, Joe Malone, good friend of ours, who's something similar with, you know, it's not just a brand that you've created, it's your name in this instance as well. And that was obviously a tricky time.
It was, and funnily enough, I mean, not many people know this, but when we first started, it wasn't my name.
I didn't on it. My research isn't that good.
No, and not many people do know it. I always had my name within the clothes. It was always that label. But the stores, when we first opened our store, was called Q, C-U-E.
Okay.
And unbeknown to us, Austin Reed owned that name. And when they found out that we had this store operating in a tiny little store off the beaten track in my hometown, they said, who's this person? You know, like, she's got to stop using that name. And we were like, oh, didn't realize. Very naive at the time, but it was quite scary because they were a big company and we were just a tiny, tiny company, and of no threat to anyone at that time. So, so we just thought, well, what are we going to do? You know, what will we call it? And the easiest option was to drop that name and use mine.
So when we look at, obviously, the setbacks that you've had, challenges you've encountered, you've returned. You're back in the fashion industry with your name, with your label, obviously with Boohoo, who acquired the brand in 2019. But what motivated you to come back into the industry, and how does it feel, to be back?
Well, after sort of a 20-year journey, building business and then selling, at which point, 2004, I felt exhausted by the industry and by work and by personal things going on in my personal life at the time. My partner was my partner in business as well as at home. We had separated. We'd actually sold a proportion of the business prior to that to a consortium of people. And then a couple of years later, the entirety we sold. But the timing felt right for me personally. We were offered a good amount of money. I felt that I'd exhausted what I wanted to do. I was physically, emotionally drained. And I found that the high street was beginning to become very samey, and I felt like it would implode. And it was time to step back and let someone else take over.
I think at the time you was quoted as saying you're done with the business, with this business.
I really felt that I was at the time. I needed that rest. I had young children as well. And yeah, emotionally, I found it very challenging.
And obviously working with Boohoo, a young company, let's say, again, through research, we've heard you say that there were some challenges with working with an organization like that for different reasons, but especially with the culture and the youth, and obviously a company that you set up many years ago. So how did you enjoy it? Was it difficult at the beginning?
With Boohoo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not here.
Yeah, I was very reluctant to go back with them. I knew that they were keen to talk to me when they bought it in 2019. But, they weren't known for having higher-end brands, and it was all online, and I knew immediately they would close the stores, which for me was pretty devastating, actually. I felt like the legacy would die after building it 20, 30 years. So I was pretty saddened by it, but also at the time I was again going through my own personal sort of things I was dealing with. So I was quite angry and not in the right space to talk to them. So I dismissed it for a couple of years. And then once I'd sort of come out of all the other side of everything I was going through, I thought, you know what? I'm keen to get back into fashion. It's what I know. It's what I'm passionate about, what I love. And I felt that I had something to offer. So I went along to talk to them, and they said all the right things. And we did a 30-piece collection called The Founder, which released May last year. And off the back of that, they invited me to do another year with 4 collections, which we're halfway through now. And I have to say, I was a little bit reluctant and hesitant about going because I wasn't sure how they'd receive me and how, it's 20 years since I've been in the industry. So although I felt that I still had a relevance, I wasn't sure how I'd fit into a big corporate company like themselves. And but I have to say, they welcomed me with open arms, and being such a young team that they are, many of them weren't even born when we started, and so they were quite keen to learn and listen to me as a founder. Many of them didn't even know I existed. So, they've been really good, although I've had to get used to a different way of working. I was much more hands-on when we had the company. We ran our house more like an atelier because we were doing all the designs, the pattern cutting, the sample room. And so it's very different, the organization now, where everything's going through the factory and you're seeing things, but it's just a faster pace and you're not so hands-on. But I've insisted that I'm still as hands-on as I can be with the fits and things like that. So yeah, it's just getting used to different ways of working. And you have to remember also, when we sold the company, there wasn't an online platform,
Sure.
or it was just beginning to bubble away. And at that time, I was like, oh, I can't imagine this ever working. But of course, I was wrong, and I've embraced that. But again, it's working differently because they don't have to look now at physical stores, how the collection's going to work. You know, so it became a little bit more like a catalogue, so you scroll. And I felt when they first took it, that's how it was looking. But I think they've sort of refined that a little bit now, and it's looking better. So it's a work in progress.
Oh, absolutely. So, but what did you take from it? You know, obviously working with, you know, a younger generation of retailers, let's say, working, and Boohoo's, you know, a huge organisation. So it's easy to get lost in amongst it. But you know, what's your key takeaways? What did you come away from that thinking?
Well, I think it's important, you know, wherever you are, to listen to other people, listen and learn. Doesn't mean to say you agree with everything, but I think you've got to be open to different ways of working. And for me, being set in my ways in how I did things, I had to sort of step back and think, okay, is this working? Is this the way forward? And I still struggle with that a little bit because I'm a bit old school, really. And you know, it is a younger generation, and the way forward is different. So for me, coming back and talking to everyone here as well, and listening to other people and their experiences and how they operate, is pretty key in me going forward and how I want to continue, because I do want to continue. In some way or another, whether that's with Boohoo or whether that's doing other collaborations.
Sure.
You know, I'm here and I'm open to offers.
There we go. Come and speak to Karen. So Karen, when we attended a dinner in the UK recently, and you gave some advice to somebody that spoke here a couple of years back, Lottie, without realizing it. And she sent a very nice message the day after. And Lottie's a founder of a brand, 2 years old, on Dragon's Den in the UK, and disheartened with the journey or the speed of success, and tempted to give it up after 2 years of not making any profit, but you know, growth in sales. They met at one of our dinners, and the next day Lottie messaged and said it was fantastic because you had a word with her and said, darling, it took 10 years. 10 years for me to be successful, and it put things into perspective for her.
Yeah, and I think people probably don't realize that our business is 40-odd years old now. We started, you know, in the early 80s, but most people probably only heard of it during the 90s because that's when the expansion really did take place. In the first 10 years, we were busy building the bones of the business, the infrastructure, and making sure that we were, you know, ready to take that next leap. And that probably wasn't planned, it's just the way it happened. And I think sometimes with successful businesses, it's not all about, you know, your plan, it's how it falls into timing, luck. You know, there's so many contributing factors that, you know, we were lucky. We weren't able to get the finance that we wanted at the beginning, so it made us grow very organically and slowly. And so by the end of the 10 years, we'd had 4 stores in the southeast, and by the end of that, there was a recession, the early 90s, and we were able to grab all the opportunities then because we didn't have heavy finance, but we had an infrastructure that made us able to expand.
So we're going to ask for a little bit of advice. We have marketplace attendees, founders, entrepreneurs from the Middle East and further afield. Let's ask you for some advice, Karen. What would you give advice to aspiring entrepreneurs and creators in the fashion industry?
Well, I think like any industry, if you're going to start a business, you've got to find, you know, something that you're absolutely passionate about, something that you really want, because, you know, you're in it long term. Don't think of something flippantly and just think, well, I'll give it a go for a couple. You have to actually be so passionate about it that you're living, breathing, sleeping. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think, you know, if you want a business that's long term, you've got to start slowly and build slowly. And I guess really for us, I was only 19. I had nothing to lose. This was my way forward. I think today, in today's generation, they want everything so instantly because they're used to that with social media and everything else. I think, you know, they live in a slightly different world to what I grew up in. And I was happy to do that, although it was frustrating at times, but we knew no different, and we had no comparisons, if you like. So it worked in our favor, and that's why I say sometimes you don't, it's not what you plan, it's just the way it is. And as long as you just keep going and you're focused and open to ideas, but make sure that your vision stays the vision.
So be focused, be brave, and be patient.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, so last question as we're moving into lunch shortly. So we want to look to the future. So we want to know if you'll be working more with Boohoo, whether you're going into something else. What does the future hold for Karen?
Well, I don't really know. I think all I know is that I feel alive again. I feel, I feel so excited that I'm back out there. I'm doing what I love. What I'm passionate about. And it's exciting to see that there's so many opportunities now, so many more than I feel there were 20 years ago when we sold it. Maybe that was just me because I was exhausted. I wasn't looking for those opportunities, but there definitely is, so much more available now. And that's why coming to a place like this, Retail Summit, meeting like-minded people or people that are going through on that journey, it's a great opportunity for me to learn and to be open to opportunities. And as I said earlier, collaborations maybe. I'm not sure people say to me, well, will you start it all over again? Parts of me really want to, because I feel like I still got something to add and do, but at the same time, age is against me. And do I want to focus on one thing? So I don't know. I'm open to things, I'm listening, and I'm sure something will spark and something will happen.
I'm sure it will. Well, I'm glad you're back. I'm sure everybody here is glad you're back as well. We look forward to the future with you.
Thank you.
Everybody, round of applause for Karen Millen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you.